Hey, this is a great time for you to click the like button, click the subscribe button, because this episode in particular shares some information that really will keep you from being sorry you ever got up today. Pat, recently I was at an air show, and I know you were recently at an air show. I think it's called Sun and Fun. I can't remember. And there are some awesome military jets there, things like the F-35 and stuff. And they are great to see. But, if I was flying along the coast of Florida, headed south past Palm Beach International, and I suddenly saw an F-16 right next to me, I'd be very unhappy. And that has happened more than 24 times so far this year. I think we need to talk about TFRs.
Let's do it.
You know what amazes me about this, Pat, is when you and I both started flying, there was no such thing as a TFR. Much like the Alpha Bravo Charlie Delta Echo Golf airspace, we had to learn that.
Yeah.
It's really important that pilots understand TFRs, how they work, where they are. They pop up out of nowhere, they disappear. You could go through them under certain circumstances, or maybe you're going to end up with an escort, and it would be wise if you knew how to respond to that escort, because they're really not playing around.
Now they don't have much of a they being whoever the authorities are that will come chasing you. Really don't have much of a sense of humor. Now, let's talk about a couple of different types of TFRs. Of course, there's a presidential TFR, and we'll get into details on that in a minute. But there are things like sport stadium TFRs and Disney World TFR and things like that. And I'm going to talk in just real generalities here because, your mileage may vary as always. But generally speaking, and I mean generally speaking, you can fly through those little 3 mile TFRs as long as you're talking to ATC on a squawk code.
Mm-hmm.
Normally you can. For example, we were, as you know, we were at Sun and Fun this past week, and we landed in Kissimmee. They took us right smack over the top of the Disney TFR, right through the airspace. I mean, we were below the top of the Disney TFR on final approach. When they sent us home the other day, we were taken off in such a way that our departure leg took us right over the top of Disney World, right through the big red circle.
Now, you were on an IFR flight plan, if I'm not mistaken. I've done the same thing VFR, because from my home airport to Orlando exec, the straight line goes right through that. I just use VFR flight flying. I have a discrete squawk code. I'm talking ATC, no problem. Go right through it. But if you're squawking 1200, don't even think about it. It's not going to work out.
Well, if you're talking to ATC, whether you're IFR or VFR, by definition, you're very likely to have a code.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, you can fly. And again, I'm talking in very great generalities right here, but you can fly through those small 3 mile TFRs, usually IFR or VFR, as long as you're talking to ATC and you're squawking a code. We have, when the Astros play baseball here in Houston, the TFR pretty much closes off the VFR corridor in between the east and west sides. It normally just takes us right basically over downtown and over to the either east or west side. And I remember the first time I encountered this, I was talking to ATC and the circle was red. And I said to the ATC, where I was on flight following with a code, I said, "Can you vector me around this TFR?" And the guy says, "No," he says, "You're talking to me." He says, "You can fly right through that." And I said, "Say again." And he said, "No, you're talking to me. You can fly right through that." I said, "All right, well, I'm glad I got that on tape." and,
Absolutely.
and he
I've done the
chuckled.
same thing.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. He chuckled a little bit and we had a good laugh over it. But so since then, I really haven't worried about it. To just call him up, get flight following, and off you go. Um, and the same thing again with the Disney TFR. Oftentimes, when the Rangers are playing baseball up in the Dallas area in Arlington, if you're going to be going into the Arlington airport, the TFR, the small 3 mile TFR around the ballpark, I think is what they call it up there, is on final to the south runway. Or if you're taking off to the north, it's on the departure leg. So, but again, as long as you're talking to the tower, squawking a code, it's really fine. So, you know, I mean, I say this in the Rusty Pilot seminars I do. Look, all TFRs are serious. All TFRs are serious, but they're not all created equal. And that's the thing. I think that's really the key, is knowing what it is you're facing as you're flying along, and this red circle is getting bigger and bigger and bigger as you approach it. What kind of a TFR is it, and what kind of wiggle room do you have?
Well, and you're in the great state of Texas. I am what is now known the free state of Florida. We both have a president. Yours is retired, mine is active. We both have prohibited areas in our state. And both of those are things you really don't want to play around with. And I mentioned at the top of this, we've had more than 24 GA aircraft violate the presidential TFR down at Mar-a-Lago. And there's a reason for that. People aren't paying attention. Pardon me. People aren't paying attention, and they don't do their pre-flight brief the way they should, and that's unfortunate, because a presidential TFR, you violate that, you really will end up with a helicopter or an F-16 off your wing, and you're not going to enjoy how that turns out at all. But one of the challenges here, Pat, and you may have done this before, if I'm off the east coast of Florida, flying south, say, from Jacksonville down towards the Keys, and I'm just enjoying the view and the clear water and everything's great. As I get down to Palm Beach International, the runways are only a couple miles inland and they run east-west. So if I'm on VFR flight following, they're going to tell me they want me at 500 feet or below, a quarter mile off the beach, or 1,000 feet or below, 5 miles off the beach. I'm flying a single. I don't want to be 5 miles off the beach.
Right.
I can't do that when the presidential TFR is in force, unless I am doing VFR flight following. I can't just pretend I'm a banner tower and blast through. And NORAD has some really good, concise kneeboard style information that I think is really worth sharing. I'll share the link in the show notes on this. You really should have it, but it tells you how to safely deal with a TFR, whether that's transiting through it, landing or taking off from an airport that's in it, or just staying the hell out of there. It's got great information, and should you screw up, it's also got information on how to deal with an intercept, because you don't want to get that wrong.
Yeah, let me just clear up one thing though, Jamie, because you mentioned flight following. The fact is that you have to be on an IFR or a VFR flight plan, not just flight following. This has
Right.
to be on an IFR or VFR flight plan, squawking a code as you would if you were using flight following, for example, or IFR, and talking to the controlling authority. Now that said, if you do that, and of course that doesn't include the 10-mile ring, the inner ring on the big presidential TFR, because you can't fly through that period. But that
Right.
30-mile outer ring, you can fly through that all day long till the cows come home. But what you can't do is loiter when you're in there. So, for example, let's say that one of your favorite airports was inside that 30-mile ring, and you wanted to go do some crosswind touch and goes or something because the conditions were right for that. Nope, can't do that because you're loitering now inside that 30-mile ring. But you could stop there, pick up a friend, take off, keep on going. You could originate a flight from there, take off, go do what you want to do. Again, on a flight plan, come on back in, just reverse the process. Several years ago, one of the presidents, whoever was in office at the time, was here in Houston, and the 30-mile ring encompassed West Houston Airport. And I had a meeting down south of Houston, and it was like, I'll be darned if I'm going to let the president stop me from flying, So I filed my flight plan, and I called it happened to be an IFR flight plan, and I called clearance delivery, and normally they give you a clearance, they give you squawk code, and then they release you and off you go. But this time, no less than 3 times, the clearance delivery guy said, make sure you're squawking that code before you break ground.
Mm-hmm.
Make sure 3 times he told me, make
Oh,
sure
they're
you're
not kidding
squawking.
around.
No, they're not kidding around. But so I was grateful for his help, and made sure I was squawking that code and took off. And it was an absolutely uneventful trip. And you know something? The radios were really quiet because there weren't a whole lot of people that were willing to do what I was doing.
We
Yeah.
did have an instance a while back where two fighters went supersonic to get down to Mar-a-Lago TFR because somebody had strayed into it. But that's why I really like this NORAD kneeboard card, because it's got a great graphic of a generic TFR. It's not a specific one. But as you say, if I'm on a flight plan, VFR or IFR, and I've got a squawk code and I'm talking to ATC, I've got options, not in that inner 10 mile, but in the outer 30 mile. As you say, I can take off, I can land, I can transit through. I've got options. But it's really critical we understand that it's there, because they pop up and they go away. And we don't want to violate that. The other thing I really like about that NORAD thing is it does have the intercept procedures,
Yeah.
where that helicopter or F-16 is going to show up off your left wing and they're going to pass you and they're going to turn. They want you to follow them. So go where they go and tune to guard 121.5. They don't know what frequency you're on. Tune to guard, follow the instructions. If they tell you to land, land. If they tell you to go someplace, go someplace. Yeah, you have a problem and it might be a little bit elevated beyond I have a phone number for you when you land, but just follow instructions, because while they've never had, to this point, there's never been a case where a fighter has shot down a civilian airplane. They are real fighters. They actually are armed. And if you're just belligerent and go wherever you want to go, that might not work out for you.
Yeah, I want to be careful about that kind of stuff, Jamie. Like I said, TFRs are all serious. They're not necessarily all created equal, but they are all serious. And the FAA and TSA, they don't are not known for their sense of humor.
Well, and I think it's good that we're covering this, and I think clearly the fact that this keeps happening, people need to brush up on it. But let's touch just for a moment on prohibited areas, because we
Yeah.
both have them. I
Yep.
have one up in Jacksonville around a submarine pen. You've got them out in Texas. Every once in a while, somebody will try and fly over the top of a prohibited area like it's a 2,000 or 3,000 foot TFR. That is not how that works.
Well, maybe. Does
Pat,
that
maybe Brown, has
does that
something to
sound like
say.
a recurring theme? For example, you mentioned prohibited areas. Yes, we have a retired president, George Bush, the second, and he has a ranch in Crawford, Texas, up near Waco. P-49 surrounds that, and it's from the surface to 2,000 feet.
Okay.
So I can fly over his house all day long, and it's a lovely house, by the way. I've seen it from 2,300 feet. So uh, perfectly legal, nothing wrong at all. It's a prohibited area, but
Mhm.
above 2,000 feet, you're good. Now, I don't press my luck and get a current altimeter setting go down to 2,050 feet,
Yep.
but I have flown over his ranch, coincidental to the route coming home. I didn't divert
And
to
just like TFRs, they are published, restricted areas and all that. They are published. You know the dimensions of it. So just don't play fast and loose. And I say this in Rusty Pilots. You are being watched by somebody, especially with ADS-B out and all that now. Don't be that guy who's like, well, I've got a terrific iPad resolution. I can get within 100 yards of that barrier and it's okay. No, no, give it a mile or two. Give it some space. You don't want to be the guy where the controller's like, that guy busted the airspace and you got to prove you didn't. That's kind of tough. So
Yeah, and
be polite.
one thing that I remember reading or hearing from I think it was an ATC source. It basically says that ATC uses their radar system to determine distances of rings and things like that. So your foreflight, which may be way more accurate than their distance rings based on their radar programming, um, may not carry much weight if they say that you busted their airspace and you can show your flight track. Well, no, you didn't. Well, maybe that's an argument. I don't know.
You know, this puts me in the mind of, we used to have a police chief here in town who was very creative, and he had a police car painted so the front half looked like a police car and the back half was painted like a taxi. and it was an anti-DUI thing because, like every place, we have a problem with people getting a little overserved and getting out on the road. And the thing was, this ride with the taxi cost $20. This ride in the cop car cost 10,000.
Yeah.
So same thing when we get into TFRs and prohibited areas. You don't want to be in the position of having to defend yourself. Much better to know before you go, have a plan, follow the rules, talk to ATC so you don't get in a jam, and then you never have to hire the lawyer and go to the hearing or any of that.
Speaking of know before you go, what a great lead in, Jamie. Uh, AOPA on the Air Safety Institute website has a terrific video online course called Know Before You Go. Highly recommended. It's fun. And if you're registered with FAAsafety.gov, you get wings credit for it. So it's all good. Know Before You
And
Go on AOPA's website.
yeah, absolutely right. And I will link the NORAD website to this and the TFR website where they're all listed. You can see them in advance. And please get a briefing, get an actual briefing. Don't do that. Well, looks like a nice day. I guess I'll go. Because if you're in a place like Texas or Florida or Virginia or New York, it's entirely possible that you could inadvertently find yourself in a whole world of hurt flying a route you've flown 100 times before.
Absolutely.
Pat, thanks. I believe we've saved the world again. And if just one pilot doesn't end up in the pokey over this, I feel we've done our job.
We've done our duty. All right, my friend. Adios.